focuses on, I'm an undergrad at Stanford, and there's a big social dance community there, and I was kind of sucked into it my freshman year, and before I was transitioning, and I actually started as a lead. So that was a pretty interesting thing to do, because nobody really does that. Girls don't really do lead in the social dance community. So this piece is basically about my experience as a lead in this community and what happened as I decided to transition. And it happened during my sophomore year, and I'm a senior, so this was like 2 years ago. This is a while. Usually in social dance, role reversal meant switching from lead to follow or vice versa. When I started social dance my spring quarter freshman year, I did it role reversed as a female lead. By the winter quarter of my sophomore year, I had role reversed again, but I hadn't switched from lead to follow. I had switched from female to male. This little detail did lead to some problems. The world of social dance is a world of leads and follows, men and women, a world where gender roles are strictly defined. This was no place for someone like me, in an awkward in-between stage, who had just started to transition. In this world, people like me did not exist. But strangely enough, the social dance community here at Stanford became a place where I belonged. It became, in fact, the first place I belonged. Social dance was the first community I've ever felt valid and appreciated. During my first quarter freshman year, several of my older friends raved about a man named Richard Powers, who had instructed the social dance classes at school. A couple of friends, intrigued, decided to take social dance 1 that spring quarter and see if this man was as legendary as others claimed him to be. And for some odd reason, I was dragged into it. I was reluctant at first, but I conceded on the one condition that I would learn the lead, the men's part. And hell, I could meet some cute girls while I'm at it. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was a little difficult at first, being the only female lead in the class, but I learned how to assert myself, and soon enough, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than those friends who had forced me to take it in the first place. Looking back, I realized that I liked it because even before I learned how to look like a man, walk like one, speak like one, even before I even conceived of the possibility that I was a man, I learned the men's role for the first time in that social dance class. I had gotten a taste of what it was like to be male, and I basked in it. It was the one reason I fell in love with social dance in the first place. I vividly remember when I realized I was a man. It was during fall quarter of my sophomore year, when I was taking my second social dance class. Around the end of November, the LGBT Community Center on campus sponsored Transgender Awareness Week. I attended a discussion on transgender rights because some friends insisted that I went. There, we had to do an exercise where we had to draw a line on a piece of paper and label one end male and the other end female, and then we had to mark where we identified on that spectrum. But I couldn't. I couldn't put myself anywhere on that line. I knew that if I did, I would regret it. So I just stuffed that piece of paper into my pocket, and my place on that spectrum unmarked. At the beginning of social dance class the following Tuesday, I reached in my pocket to silence my cell phone when I found that piece of paper again. I stared at it for a while. It dared me to finally make a decision. But I stuffed that paper back in my pocket and decided to forget about it. But during class, I realized how unsettlingly comfortable it was when I was referred to as part of the men. I thought about it. It just seemed right that I was a man. The word man fit me more than gay or lesbian or woman ever did. I never did like being called Christina, which is my female name. Whenever I had to introduce myself and say my own name, you shouldn't hate to say your own name. That night when I came home, I looked up transgender on Wikipedia, and then I knew. It was the first half of winter quarter I hit rock bottom. My depression, which had been in remission since high school, suddenly invaded my life again. A lot of thoughts ran through my head. I wondered why I had to be born this way, whether I was willing to come out to everyone again. It hadn't been hard enough coming out as gay in high school. I wondered if I was willing to live as part of a group whose hate crimes were increasing every year. I wondered if it was even worth it to go through that whole process of hormone therapy, surgery, to have something that resembled what I should have gotten by default right from the beginning. I was stuck with this body and I hated it. I admit that I seriously contemplated killing myself. It was pretty bad. There would be nights when I didn't know whether or not I'd make it to the morning. I'm not sure how I managed to go to class every day. But it had been one social dance class when we were switching partners. I had been left out when Richard Powers said that those without partners should raise their hand. I did, and he said, "Oh, Christopher needs a partner." It wasn't a big deal to anyone else, but for me, it was. This had been the first time I had felt acknowledged for who I was. I emailed him to say thanks. I thought that was all it was going to be, but he offered to tell the class that I was Christopher, not Christina. I really didn't want to. This class was the biggest social dance class ever, and it was hard enough to come out to one person. Coming out to 100-something people was entirely another matter. It took me a while to decide what I wanted to do. I was scared that those people I'd come to know in the social dance community would turn their backs on me. But if I was going to be a man, I had to face whatever I did. If they couldn't accept me for who I was, then they weren't real friends to begin with. So I told Richard Powers that yes, I would like to come out to the class. It happened the following Thursday. I was a mess the entire morning. I had class right before social dance, and I didn't pay attention to anything at all. Instead, I was writing what I was going to say. I went through about 3 drafts in half an hour. Time came about halfway through that day's social dance class. I thought Richard was just going to say, "This is Christopher and he is a boy," and then he would move on with life. But he didn't. He talked about how I started last year's Christina, and that I had become Christopher, and how I thanked him when he referred to me by that right name, and the class should be supportive of me, because I had just started transitioning, and things were hard for me at the moment. He told my whole story. I didn't think anyone would care enough about me to tell the class my whole story. Then I read my little speech out loud to the class. I talked about how I had realized I was only a boy recently, that I didn't want to stop what I loved to do just because I was in this awkward stage of my life. Whenever I looked up, I saw people I knew, people I lived with, people who had taken social dance with me right from the beginning. People I had class with outside of social dance. There was one guy in my Japanese class, another guy in my English class, 2 girls from my creative writing class. There was a girl I had a crush on. I saw her looking straight at me. God, everyone was looking at me. Reading that little piece of paper was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done. But the entire class of 100-something people, all of them, started clapping for me. All of that previous frustration from the quarter melted away. I had made my declaration to the class, and they had accepted me. I had never thought this would happen. I no longer had to pour so much effort into trying to pass as a guy, to dress like one, act like one, talk like I had to do in the outside world. My class was fine with who I was, awkwardness and all. And for the first time that quarter and in my whole life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. It felt like home. After class, someone came up to me and gave me a hug. Another guy told me good luck and said that he appreciated what I had said, since he had a brother who was transgender. It was a little surreal. The world of social dance became the first place where I was not called only by cautiously gender-neutral Chris, but by the undoubtedly male Christopher, and the first place where people consistently used male pronouns. The first place where I could look at my name on the roster and think, that's me.